By the way, for the past 6 years, the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, has had a great rubber stamp relationship. He's got a lot of approval from the conservative-led state legislature there in Florida. But over the past 2 weeks, something has changed. Some members of his administration have been called for questioning about the alleged misappropriation of a $10 million payment. There's been an investigation here by the Tampa Bay Times and Miami Herald, and they found that that money was supposed to be used to help struggling families in the Sunshine State, but instead, the funds were allegedly diverted to the governor's political committees through a state-created fund, which is closely associated with Ron DeSantis' wife, Casey. That fund is called the Hope Florida Foundation. Now, questions are being asked about the legitimacy of Hope Florida's work overall. The governor and the First Lady, Casey DeSantis, deny all of these allegations, and they say the findings of the investigation are incorrect. The governor is also not happy about being challenged by his fellow Republicans.
None of these Republican leaders got elected on the platform that they were going to launch baseless attacks against the governor and First Lady. We have some of these leaders in the Florida House who are stabbing their constituents in the back. This is being driven by the leadership in the House, by some of the entrenched staff. This is the swamp in action.
Well, just this morning, a hearing that had been scheduled to take place on all of this didn't take place because the witnesses who were set to appear ultimately refused to show up. What is going on? Here to help us understand what's going on and what it could mean for the DeSantis political present and future is CBS News Miami political reporter Jim DeFede. Jim, it's really great to have you here. You are who I go to for all things Florida politics. And so I'm hoping you can explain to us how the conservative Republican legislature there in Florida has taken this more investigatory or at least curious stance when it comes to Ron DeSantis at the moment.
You're absolutely right, Tony. For 6 years, the first 6 years, the Florida legislature, the Republican-dominated legislature, gave Ron DeSantis everything he wanted, in part because they wanted to support his ambitions of becoming president. But once his campaign fizzled, the fact that he couldn't get out of Iowa really ended up handicapping DeSantis, and his stature dropped dramatically in Florida among politicians who now wanted to reassert their independence, particularly House Speaker Danny Perez here in Florida. He wanted to reassert the idea that the legislature is an independent branch of government. But I will tell you that this is beyond politics. There are some legitimate questions being asked about where exactly this money went, how the state received it, and where it moved to these political committees controlled by the governor.
So, Jim, can you quickly walk us along the money trail? Where did this money come from? Where did it go?
Yeah, no, a great question, Adriana, because it gets a little complicated, but let me try to make it as simple as possible. The state of Florida learned that they had been overbilled on Medicaid payments to the tune of about $67 million by a company called Centene. Centene had settled these types of lawsuits and claims against a dozen other states around the country, and it paid out almost $1 billion. Florida's cut was going to be $67 million. So that money was supposed to be returned to the Florida taxpayers, some of it even going back to the federal government because it's Medicaid money. But instead of returning the $67 million, the DeSantis administration negotiated with Centene to have them only send $57 million back to taxpayers and instead secretly send $10 million to something called the Hope Florida Foundation, which Tony talked about in the introduction. The Hope Florida Foundation is this foundation that was created to support Casey DeSantis' signature program, which is Hope Florida, a program intended to try to get poor people off of government assistance and help them find private charities and churches to supplant what government does. So it's a good cause, but the money never even went to that purpose. The $10 million that then got transferred from Centene to Hope Florida Foundation within days was then routed to 2 political committees and then to a 3rd political committee that was under the control of Ron DeSantis' then chief of staff, James Othmeyer, to be used in the anti-marijuana campaign. So quickly, taxpayer-refunded money, the money that should have been returned to taxpayers, went to a foundation to help poor families. It didn't help poor families, and instead went to a political committee that had political purposes to try to fight the marijuana amendment.
So, Jim, Casey DeSantis has future aspirations, we understand, to be governor of Florida. Ron DeSantis has future aspirations in politics, even after he's governor. So this matters where the buck stops. They deny all these allegations. But I wonder, could somebody end up taking the blame for this who's not named DeSantis?
So the person who's getting a lot of attention right now is James Oathmeyer, who was, at the time of all these negotiations, the governor's chief of staff. Now, when Ashley Moody was named United States Senator to replace Marco Rubio, Ron DeSantis rewarded James Oathmeyer, and he is now the state's attorney general. So the top law enforcement official in Florida is the attorney general, James Oathmeyer, who is now caught up in what the chairman of the House committee this morning called a conspiracy to commit money laundering and wire fraud. So I can tell you, based on my reporting as well, that the chairman of the committee told me late yesterday that he's already been in touch with the Department of Justice to try to see if they're willing to look into and investigate this matter.
Wow.
All right, so this could become a federal issue as well. Jim, thank you so much.
Really appreciate it, Jim.